This is Karen Hudes. This is the second video which I've been filming today. Today is June, no, sorry. Yes, it is June. It's June 22nd, and I'm very grateful to my videographer, but I'm not going to mention who he is, but yes, I'm very grateful to him. And the title of this video is Black Lives Matter. I'm going to start off by telling you about a conversation that I had a couple of days ago with my Lyft driver named Frederick, who's from Cameroon, and he picked me up at my house, which is right behind a church where there was a demonstration about Black Lives Matter. And I told you he's from Cameroon, and we started talking about how Black Lives Matter. And one of the things we were talking about, I was amazed, because this is a man who started out talking about spirituality and how he happens to be Catholic, but he doesn't understand what role the Vatican has played in Black lives. He doesn't understand anything at all. Because he's been brainwashed. That's one of the things that the Black nobility does. They have hijacked our spirituality. And so he was very happy to hear that although I'm Jewish, I was baptized, and I went to heaven in my early 20s and saw Jesus Christ on the throne. But in the meantime, I've learned a little more, and what I've learned is that the Vatican has been hijacking people's spirituality, and they've been using that to have people kill each other. If you look at what was going on between the Russians, who had one version of Christianity, and the rest of the Christians, which were, there's the Roman Church. That was where it supposedly started. But in the meantime, we can talk about Buddhism. We can talk about the indigenous people who looked at the healers and went way, way back, much further back. We can look at the Berbers. They were the Moroccans. That was the first country that recognized the United States. Now, I don't want to get involved in history, but since we started talking about history, you understand that the Russians at Moscow State University have discovered that the Black nobility, these crooks that have been in power ever since the previous Ice Age and further, 10,000 years, they've been falsifying history. And Moscow State University has proven that the dates that things actually happened and what the Black nobility says are two different things. But anyway, let's get back to Black Lives Matter and Frederick. So Frederick became a bosom buddy of me because he's talking about the Catholic faith. But if he were a true African, he would understand that, and one of the things that he was saying, Frederick, was he said the colonists, they don't say what the African people's names are. They say, that's my name according to the colonists. So, and he said this in French, and I'm sorry, I forgot what it was. But he said the French name and the Portuguese name, and that's my name according to the colonists. That's not my real name. My real name is something quite different. And then he told me what his real name was. But I thought it was really, it was too bad, because I asked Frederick, do you know anything about the Moors and the fact that the Moors have been fighting the Black nobility, and there was a very big war, and the Moors lost it. And the Moors and the Arab people, they're the ones that preserved our culture. And Greece, when you talk about the Greek people, uh, Aristotle was living in the Middle Ages. And that's what the Moscow State University understands. But let's get back to Black Lives Matter. What's happening here? The United States is trying to foment a race war and riots with the black people. That's called divide and conquer. That's what these crooks that have been stealing human beings' taxes, for example. What are taxes? Taxes are all going to the crooks because the countries themselves, they're not. The Constitution in the United States was stolen. There's a second secret Constitution in 1871. And actually, the Civil War, 1861, that's when Lincoln, why was Lincoln assassinated? He was assassinated because he was trying to print greenback dollars. And when you do that, you take away the money from the black nobility. They're very interested in hijacking our money. And so one of the things that I tweeted, I think this past week, was I showed how the IRS was sending me letters saying that they were going to, that if I didn't finish paying my taxes for 2017, that they were going to arrest me. Well, have they arrested me? Am I arrested? No. The reason why I'm not arrested is because I'm part of something called the critical mass. We were talking last week about how reality changes when enough people believe something. Well, there are enough people, including the military powers of all the world, they understand that all of their constitutions have been stolen. And if Frederick, the Lyft driver, was smart, he wouldn't stop talking about Jesus Christ. He would be talking about other spiritual leaders, other prophets. We've had many prophets in addition to Jesus Christ. And all of these prophets, they're human beings. And the interesting thing about human beings is that once we start using our fourth brain, which all of us are able to do, we become as spiritual as the next person. We are immortal. We have immortal souls. Now, I don't want to start talking about reincarnation because I don't know the first thing. And actually, one of the things that's been holding us back is that I have to be in touch with the universe. I have to let people know that there's right and wrong, and there's good and bad, and there's truth and lies. And until I'm able to let people know, how do I know these things? Believe me, it's not because I'm wise. It's because I work together with people. That's one of the things that I've learned. I'm not perfect. As a matter of fact, I'm far from it. And I need help. And so one of the things that I learned a long time ago, is that I have to work with other people. For example, I have a terrible memory. Now, my husband, we're separated, but he has a wonderful memory. And when we separated, I lost half of my past because I have a terrible memory. And that's one of the things that I had to learn. There was another thing I had to learn. How did I get married? It's because I read a very good book when I was single. It was in my middle 30s. And the book was Smart Women, Foolish Choices. There were 4 women, and we all started working together to figure out what we were doing wrong. That was what that book taught me. And so I've had these 4 friends. 2 of them are still there. One of them is my closest friend, but we've had a terrible fight. What did we fight about? We fought about the fact that she and her adopted daughter are, they're no longer speaking to each other. And as her best friend, I felt that I really ought to let her know, because who is my best friend married to? She's married to a physicist who wasn't able to write about what the sun really is. The sun is really a magnetic resonance. It's part of the universe. It's connected to the universe. And he's one of the only physicists that knows this. When I was visiting them in Florida a while ago, I found out that there was a man, his best friend, from DARPA. That's the CIA's scientific arm. And this man left a letter back in their Florida apartment, which let me know that he was from DARPA. And then I realized that Bob has not been able to publish what the sun truly is because of his friend who's from DARPA, who left the letter back in the apartment. Now, how is it that I keep finding these things? Well, let me tell you about my mother and her book club. Her book club is 65 years old, and I'm sort of an unofficial member because my mother has wanted to host the book club meeting, and the reason she's living in the old age home she's in is because there were other members of the book club there. Some of them are her friends, and some of them are her enemies. And the one that's her enemy, that's the sister of a man who's the head of the CBS. Now, anyway, getting back to systems, one of the very interesting things that I found out about systems was, you realize I was imprisoned in an insane asylum, and they wouldn't let me out. And the reason that I got out was because there was another person who was also imprisoned in that insane asylum. They called it a hospital, but it wasn't a hospital. And this person who was also imprisoned with me, he was from the mafia. Why did he let me out? It's because of, let me turn this around, because of these rings. Because it turns out that my great-grandfather was the one who started the mafia in the United States. And he was actually Jewish, but he didn't tell anybody. There are some people in Italy. Now, how do I know this? Because my older sister had a DNA test, and it turns out that we're 100% of Jewish blood. They can tell that in the DNA. And my great-grandfather, well, if he weren't Jewish, then we wouldn't have had that test. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit distracted, but let me get back to the punchline, which is that the Vatican has been trying to get people to fight each other, and they have the world's wealth, and actually they don't have the world's wealth. It was deposited in the World Bank at the end of World War II. And let me again mention Jacek Kugler, who was the man who brought me a very, very powerful military, well, it wasn't military. The military hired him to show this. It was a power transition model, which is 90 to 95% accurate. And when Jacek Kugler brought that to me at the World Bank, he said, "Karen, we have 5 years to prevent a nuclear war in the Middle East." Well, you haven't seen that war. That's because I've been using Jacek Kugler's power transition model, which is 90 to 95% accurate. And I'm still using that model, and I can tell you where the coalitions are. How does this model work? You go to an expert, and you ask that expert to say who's involved in the problem, that's a stakeholder, and then how powerful is that stakeholder, and how important do you think these stakeholders think that model is. And if you're an expert, you come up with the numbers, and when you crunch the numbers, the model is 90 to 95% accurate. And when they tested this power transition model in the CIA, they found out, they tested it with 200 different problems, they found out it was 90 to 95% accurate. And so when I wrote a study between my junior and senior year in college about how Ferdinand Marcos and the rest of the UN were were establishing the World Bank as a cooperative, that's when I knew, and I was in the World Bank. Well, actually, I wrote the paper before I was in the World Bank, but then I knew I had to be in the World Bank. Who brought me into the World Bank? An Egyptian lawyer who, he was the general counsel for OPEC, which is, petroleum is one of the ways that the Vatican has been trying to control everybody. So I was an insider, but I never meant to be an insider. And as I told you also, I studied in Holland, so I could speak Dutch. And I was working together with the Dutch executive director. And when I knew all about the power transition model, one year I wrote an email to all of the other executive directors. And what was in that email? I said that the executive directors had been co-opted. And I was also talking about Germany because Germany is the leader of Europe. And Germany was interested in getting their gold back. So all of these problems are very much interconnected. And I was right in the center, and I stayed in the center. And when I wrote to the German executive director, and I told the people in the Congress, I was a whistleblower in the Congress. But let me tell you, the most important thing that I've learned, and what's been holding up the global currency reset, I learned that I'm a whistleblower, but I have to be connected with the rest of the world. And when you're a whistleblower, you go and blame everybody and you tell them what they're doing wrong. And yesterday I realized that's if I stay a whistleblower, I can't be connected with the good people who are on the other side. And we have to be all interconnected. So what I learned was that first of all, I don't know everything. I don't know everything. I know from the power transition model that I can make a good guess, but I'm not all-knowing. I can't judge everybody. So if I think I can judge everybody, then I'm in trouble. Then I'm not omniscient. I can't get a swollen head. I have to be working together with everybody. And so I've been telling you, I was working with my best friend about how I ended up getting married. I've been working with Jacek Kugler. I've been working with the military powers of the world. And I've learned that if I don't work as a member of a team, I can't get the job done. That's just one of the things that I've learned. And I was telling you about working with Germany. Well, the General Counsel of the World Bank, because the legal department can tell you what's going on with the rest of the World Bank. They know that the president is not in charge. They know that it's the countries that run the World Bank. And when the World Bank was established, the very first thing that the United States did was they said to the conference, when people were agreeing whether or not they would allow the World Bank to be established, they said, if anybody wants to change the articles of the World Bank, it's got to be done not by the president. It's got to be done by the members. The World Bank is a co-op, and so in the legal department, you know that you're at the very heart. You're going to be looking to the Board of Governors to decide. And in some of the things that I've tweeted, I've told you how it is that I'm allowed to speak on behalf of the Board of Governors. I've written the minutes for all of the annual meetings and the spring meetings on behalf of the Board of Governors. And in 2015, I went to Peru, which is where the annual meeting was, and I got in and I spoke to a number of ministers of finance. And I've showed you the letters that I've written to them. And what I also did was I wrote to all of the ministers of finance in Japan, because I was working together with a Japanese whistleblower. She was training her job. Well, she was a very accomplished person, and she's actually one of the people who told me who is the who's the leader of the healers of the world. And she told me a great many things, which I otherwise wouldn't have known. So I've learned that if you want to know what's going on, you have to work in a team. And when we're talking about the global currency reset, which is going to be on behalf of everybody in the world, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to use the power transition model, which is very accurate, to guess what people want, and then we'll go back and we'll fix it if it turns out that that we're wrong. We can't be hamstrung and not fix things because we don't know what everybody's going to do when they get their constitution back. But the fact is, no country is now really representing its people, because the bankers have stolen all of the constitutions of the world. So I'm sorry if this isn't very well structured or presented. I wanted to take the time actually to do that, and I've been fighting with the black nobility. They've been erasing everything. They've been censoring everything. But because I've been fighting them for so very long, I've learned what's important and how to do it. But I guess the very important thing is to realize that I know that I'm being taught. I'm just part of the group. If I wanted to know anything, I'd have to rely on the people that I'm working together with. I'd have to rely on all of the whistleblowers at the World Bank. I'd have to rely, that's just how I function. And if you know that, and I do, then you realize that I'm not going to try to dictate anything to anybody. I'm just going to try my best, my hardest, to get it right and to be corrected and to stand corrected when we all work together as a group. And it's quite a group, humanity, as I mentioned in the earlier video. I'm going to try to upload both of these videos today, but as I mentioned in the earlier video, we have immortal souls. We're just as, and that's what Jesus Christ and Buddha and the indigenous healers have all told us. We're part of the universe, and the universe is good. And so what is the chance that the black nobility understands that we're in a peaceful transition? Well, they're going to have to learn sooner or later. The dominoes are falling. And yes, so the people that are hearing me are getting a lot more information than many people have had. This video is going to be viral. And it's not going to be viral because I'm a particularly entertaining person. It's going to be viral because I'm telling you the truth, and you've got an immortal soul. And there's not going to be divide and conquer riots, race riots in the United States. There's going to be a peaceful transition, and the black nobility is going to realize that we're in a different reality. The reality we're in, it's a wonderful reality with kind human beings, which is what we are. Human beings are kind. We have empathy. That's from what I was trying to tell you in the first video that I've taped today. Uh, that's where Dr. Gant was saying that the human brain it's going to be the human brain, and we're all interconnected. So we're kind. We're not violent. We don't like wars. We don't like killing. I was going to tell you a little bit about my uncle, who was in at the end of World War II. He had to. He was one of the people that was shooting at the Japanese, and he told me at the end of his life that he killed one of the Japanese people who he was in the war, and he was very distressed about it. But I was also going to tell you about my uncle and my father. My father, when he died, I inherited his papers, and that's where I saw the lease of the garage that his uncles had managed. My great-grandfather was the man who started the mafia in the United States, and that was how I got out of the insane asylum that they imprisoned me. There was a very famous whistleblower, Ezra Pound, who stayed in an insane asylum for 40 years. Well, I got out because of who my great-grandfather was. Yeah. I didn't know this, but I learned it when I inherited the lease, and I saw who had signed the lease. It was, well, I'm told now that I've got to wind down, so I'm just going to start with stop with being grateful and realizing that I'm not as important as all that, and I'm just part of the group, and I know that. And that's what the purpose of this video is, to let you know that we're all in this together and that Black lives do matter.